All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can catch it right here, of course. Like and comment. That always helps the cause as well. If you like the audio, you go to Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, or Stitcher, and you just search Mark Rogers TV. So I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I may drag this out just a few seconds because people tend to filter into the conversation. But if you miss some of it, obviously you go back and you watch the complete post once it processes and posts to YouTube. But we got Uncle Lou on the line to talk up some college football. How's it going today?
Hey, good morning, man. It's going pretty good. This is like the 6 weeks between now and college football season. For somebody like me, is like the longest. It reminds me of when I was a kid and we would get out of school for Christmas break. Like, Christmas is soon, but like that 2 weeks or whatever between the time you would get out of school and Christmas would seem like it took forever, And, now that I'm older, for diehard college football fans, this last 6 weeks of summer is brutal. I mean, there's no news really to talk about. Some recruiting stuff comes up here and there, but there's just nothing really exciting to talk about. And generally speaking, if you hear anything about your team this time of year, it's not good news. It's some sort of freak injury, somebody got arrested, something like that. So no news is good news, but it just seems like it takes forever to get through this last 6 weeks.
I say the same exact thing all the time. You don't want to hear anything about your team. Somebody got hurt, they got in trouble. One of the two.
Right.
That's pretty much it. That's the other thing that I hit on all the time. College football, if you love college football, maybe you love all sports, this is the biggest off season, the longest off season. Where I work, I've got a piece of the NBA in terms of some responsibility about the NBA. That season never shuts down. They're doing summer league right now. The draft was just a few weeks ago. Then they're going to go to camp. Like college football, end of the championship game in January, we got to wait all the way to September. So it is a long, long off season, unlike any other off season. But the sport on the field is just, it's the best.
Yeah, you can't beat it. I think college football has, for sure, the best regular season of any of the major sports. And that's a biased opinion by me. Obviously, college football is my favorite sport, and it's not close. But, I mean, you just can't beat the college football regular season. It just doesn't. Nothing else. No other regular season compares to it, in my opinion.
So we got Uncle Lou on the line talking college football. Of course, we'll focus on the SEC and Georgia in particular. But I see you're knocking out these previews and predictions. So, Uncle Lou, like myself, covering all of college football. So you mentioned a playoff and the way the season's structured with the playoff. We have obviously had way back when, I'm sure you remember and watched like me, when you'd watch the bowl games, the big bowl games like the Orange and the Sugar and the Rose on that particular night. You'd have to wait till the next morning's paper to know who finished number one and was the national champion. Then we got to the BCS era, and then obviously now to a 14 playoff. So are you good with the way it's set up right now?
I am. I'm perfectly happy with the 4 teams. Is it a perfect system? No, obviously not. Was the BCS perfect? No. The BCS was an improvement over what we had before. I think what we have now is an improvement over the BCS. The one thing I don't want to do is turn college football into NFL light. I mean, the reality is the playoff structure is probably going to expand at some point. There's just too much money involved and too much interest for it not to. But I'm in no hurry for that to happen. I'm not against it happening, but I'm in no hurry for it to happen, because I think at some point down the road, eventually, college football is going to be more and more like the NFL, and I'm in no hurry to get to that. So I'm happy with the 4 teams for now. If it expands to 6 or 8, the current TV deal, I think, ends in 2022 or 2023. So if anything's going to happen, that's when it will happen. So, I'm in a wait and see mode, but I don't have any complaints with the way it's set up now.
So follow me here. I don't like the 16 because you give an unfair advantage to 2 teams. And then we're going to be sitting here squabbling in December after the seedings come out of the top 2 because they have this huge advantage. They play 1 less game. I like the 8 because I still think it's elite, but I have a problem with conferences not being represented. I have an issue with that. Regardless of how bad your conference might be this particular year, it's not like we do that in the NFL and say, the AFC West sucks this year. We're going to leave them out.
Yeah. And obviously, if and when it goes to 8 teams, that problem will go away. Now, when they structured it at 4 teams, it's not like they're now surprised that a conference is getting let out. I mean, that was you knew that from, everyone knew that from day one. So they knew that going in. But if you go to 8 teams, then I think the winner of each conference championship game gets an automatic bid. Where you seed them, they can figure that stuff out. But all 5 conference champions get an automatic bid. I would take the next 2 highest ranked teams, regardless of what conference. If it's 2 other SEC teams, it's 2 other SEC. If it's 2 other Big Ten, it's 2 other Big Ten. And then for the 8th spot, I would take the highest ranked non-Power 5 team. If they're 8-4, they're 8-4. Put them in. Whoever it is, Boise State, Central Florida, South Florida, Houston, whatever, BYU, whatever you want to do, and put them in, so we can avoid this whole Central Florida fiasco that we have going on from last year.
So that's pretty much my formula. I got nothing to debate there. That's pretty much what I've touted for like 5 years or something like that. Because here's the one thing that I would love to add a task to the College Football Playoff Committee. This is my assignment for them, Lou. Send them out during August camp. Have them go to all the group of 5. Go to every school. Show up at summer camp between the 2 days while these kids are, sweating their brains out, throwing up every other day, the whole deal, and let them know, okay, here's the deal. We appreciate your effort. You can win every game 50-0. You don't have a snowball's chance in hell of making the playoffs. Good to see you. We'll see you next time. It's just the one level of football where they have no chance of making it.
Right. And I do empathize with the Central Florida players. I empathize with them. Scott Frost, no, I don't. He knew when he took that job, he was never going to make a college football playoff. I mean, there's always that there's no rule that says they can't make it. So, the back of your head type of thing, it's like the Dumb and Dumber thing. So you're telling me there's a chance, but in reality, he had to know that taking that job. So I don't really feel bad for Scott Frost. I do feel bad for the players. And I had no problem with Central Florida declaring themselves national champs and giving their own players rings, putting a banner up in their stadium. I had no problem with that. Where they crossed the line, I think, was putting billboards up in Tuscaloosa. Now we're April, May, June. They're still going around talking about it. And I don't know, it just kind of jumped the shark with me. I think it was a feel-good story in January and February and maybe even March. And I think a lot of people were like, yeah, let them do what they want to do. They're Central Florida. This is the closest they're ever going to get. Let them have their 15 minutes or whatever. But it just seems like they took it a little bit too far, in my opinion.
So the reason I like that is because back in the old days, like we mentioned off the top, when it was a poll system, if my team would have gone undefeated, like I know Penn State went undefeated twice, didn't win a national championship. Auburn, of course, obviously in 2004. If I'm Auburn, I know you hate Auburn, but I think you agree with this. You're gonna say, hey, we've got every right. We just played in the freaking best conference of the country. We're going to hang a banner. We couldn't have done anything more, so we're going to hang a banner. So I agree with that. I said the same exact thing. Throw a parade, do all that. But I like where you draw the line in terms of shoving it down Alabama's throats. They don't run the system. They didn't build the system. They don't have anything to do with it. They just play. So they had nothing to do with it. They did what they were asked to do, and they won the championship. So
right. And what happened is, take me, for example, I was pro Central Florida in January. I made several videos talking about, look, let them have their fun. This is the best they can do there. Let them have it. If they want to claim the championship, let them claim it. We all know Alabama's got the trophy and all that, but if Central Florida wants to claim it, let them claim it. This is an amazing season they had. But they lost me, and it got to the point where I had to remind them, and this is just the reality of the situation, and no one will convince me otherwise. If Central Florida played the worst 4 Power 5 teams in any of the 5 conferences 4 weeks in a row, they'd be 2-2.
Yeah, so you're not saying the 4 worst overall. You're saying like go to the Big Ten and play
the 4 worst in the SEC or the Big Ten or the Pac-12. They would not go 4-0 in 4 consecutive weeks. And I mean, there's no way to know that. No one will ever change my mind about that. There is a difference between taking 30 days to prepare for one Power 5 team versus playing 9 Power 5 teams over the course of 12 or 13 weeks. There is a difference. And Scott Frost is going to find that out in a very difficult fashion coming up here in about 6 weeks, because Nebraska will be lucky to go 6-6 this year. And that's not a shot at Scott Frost. Look at the talent level currently at Nebraska, and their schedule is absolutely brutal, having to play those 3 road games they have. There's not a team in America that could win all 3 of those road games. Forget it. So he's going to find out that who you play matters.
Well, that's a big problem I have with scheduling, and that's in every conference, but specifically with Scott Frost and Nebraska. Why do they play Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and somebody else? Like, I added the conference records for those 3 schools last year. They were 20-7, and that's even bogged down by Michigan going 5-4, losing to all the good teams. And somebody else has a 6-21 record. The teams they play, they need to even that out. But anyway, that's another discussion. We've got better things to talk about. So Mark Richt obviously holds an interesting place in your world, because obviously he was the man for 15 years, did a lot of good things, never took you to the promised land. I have arguments about Mark Richt on here all the time because I've got a lot of Miami people that like to watch, and they're pro or con, mostly pro, because he hasn't had time to screw anything up yet. And they've obviously improved from Al Golden. I want to get your take on Mark Richt's tenure at Georgia, the good, the bad, wherever you stand.
I absolutely loved Mark Richt as head coach. And as late as 2014, I was making videos yelling at Georgia fans, like, why do you want to fire this guy? Like, who are you going to get? Like, you know, I get it. We haven't won the SEC in a while, but blah, blah, blah. 2015 was the turning point for me. I mean, you had some people ready to run that guy out in 2008. We were preseason #1 team. We come out, get ran out of our own building by a second-year Nick Saban Alabama team, and it sort of downhill from there. He had Matthew Stafford, no Sean Moreno, and A.J. Green on the same team and didn't even win the East. That's hard to do. But he made it through that in 08. 2012 bought him some time, won the East, gave Alabama everything they could handle in the title game. And everyone knows whoever won that Alabama-Georgia game in 2012 was going to beat the brakes off Notre Dame. They just weren't an elite team that year. So that bought him a little bit of time. But by 2015, the Alabama game at home in Athens, I'll go to my grave. Alabama was not 30 points better than Georgia. They just weren't in any way. That was coaching. And Mark Richt and Miami fans, I've been preaching this to them for a while. They're going to find this out. Mark Richt is of the belief that there's no such thing as a big game. I mean, I understand trying to keep your team's emotions in check and things like that, but some games are just bigger than others. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. And to prepare your team all week like this is just another game, when it was that Alabama game in 2015 or a handful of other games, that's just not reality. I mean, these kids watch TV. They're on the internet. They know these are big games. And Mark Richt just doesn't reflect that, and a team tends to take on the personality of its coach. Mark Richt can walk into a post-game press conference after a game. You'll have no idea whether he won or lost. Losing does not bother Mark Richt. Name an elite coach that you can say that about. You can't. Bear Bryant, Nick Saban, these guys remember the losses way longer than they remember the wins. And that's what motivates them. Mark Richt doesn't have that killer instinct. He just doesn't have it. I'm grateful to Mark Richt for what he did at UGA. He was there for 15 years. He did everything by the book. He did it the right way. He's quote unquote a nice guy. It was just time for a change for UGA, and I think for Mark Richt too. A lot of times people work in a place for 20, 25 years. They get stale. They change, a midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. They change careers at the age of 35 or 40, and they get reinvigorated, and that could very well happen with Mark Richt. I mean, we already saw him take Miami to their first ACC championship game in school history in just his second year there. So I think Richt can have some success at Miami. Do I think he can win a national title anywhere? No, I don't.
So I never thought about that, the approach factor with Mark Richt. Everything else you said about his approach in terms of how much we can perceive that the games bother him. I don't know that I can get inside somebody's mind, but we know that, yeah, the fire burns within Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, those guys, and just tears them up when they lose. Mark Richt, I think it's pretty obvious based on how he approaches life, the balance of life, family, his faith, all that. It probably bothers him a lot less. I got to think that he's achieved this much. It still bothers him. I got to think that. But yeah, the killer instinct probably not there.
And of course, he has that famous quote that he left UGA with that really put a sour taste in a lot of Georgia fans' mouths with the whole rings don't matter quote that he had, or life is about more than rings, or whatever it was. Some like some proverb he tried to make up, like a Bible quote or something. There's more to life than winning rings. Well, everyone knows that, but line one on your job description is win football games. I mean, that's the bottom line. You're not making $5 million a year to teach these players how to balance their checkbook or how to help an old lady across the street. That's not your primary job. Your primary job is win football games. So yes, winning does matter when you're making $5 million a year to win football games. It does matter.
So that's a great point, because same thing came up with Les Miles when he got fired, and people were saying, well, they didn't go through a losing season or anything like that. And I said, absolutely. If Les Miles was selling insurance and they had 20 insurance salesmen and he was like the fourth best, sure, you'd keep him around because he's doing the job and he'd get paid like everybody else. But not when he's getting $6 or $7 million a year. You are paying him to be elite. If you want to pay Mark Richt what the standard professor on campus is making to do that, then that's another thing. $5 million a year, you're paid to win championships. All right. Is there anybody in the Eastern Division that can challenge Georgia? And are the Bulldogs going to be as good this year as they were last year?
I do think South Carolina is going to be a good team. You can't deny it. They returned Jake Bentley. Now, he's kind of up and down, throws too many interceptions for my taste, but the South Carolina fans love him. He's got a ton of experience. They get Deebo Samuel back, which, if healthy, I think is probably the best, or at least top 2 or 3 wide receivers in the SEC, if not college football. I mean, the guy is absolutely amazing what he can do. Defensively, I think they're talented on defense, and this is sort of their issue, I think, is depth. They haven't been doing what they're doing long enough to establish that quality depth. So injuries could be a huge concern for South Carolina this year, in my opinion. I also worry about their running game. No matter how good Bentley and Deebo are, to win in the SEC, you got to be able to run the ball at a consistent level, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. And the final thing is, and this is true of a lot of teams, but you have to ask yourself, okay, South Carolina is probably right now favored to win 10 of their 12 games. Obviously, they're not going to be favored against Georgia and Clemson. Let's assume they lose to Georgia and Clemson, and let's assume they're a little bit better than all the other 10 teams they play. Do you trust Will Muschamp to go 10 for 10? I don't. And that's not really a shot at Will Muschamp. It's hard to go undefeated. Alabama, and Nick Saban's got one undefeated season at Bama. Ohio State lost to Iowa. Clemson lost to Syracuse. Georgia lost to Auburn. Oklahoma lost to Iowa State. It's hard to win every single week. So I see South Carolina having the potential for maybe a 9-3 type season, which is a good season for South Carolina. And I think they could potentially finish second in the East. Now, a lot of that is contingent upon how quick Dan Mullen is able to turn things around at Florida. They're not a 4-win team. They're not. Now, Tennessee is closer to actually being a 4-win team than Florida is. I know Florida won 4 games last year, but talent-wise, they're not a 4-win team. They should be able to win 8 games at Florida really without trying. So the question becomes, can Dan Mullen elevate that quarterback play enough at Florida to compete with South Carolina and Georgia to try to win the East? I don't think he's able to do it. So I have South Carolina pegged as second in the East this year, possibly 9-3.
And with his experience with Tim Tebow and more recently with Nick Fitzgerald. That's what he's supposed to be able to do. But that also was supposed to be Jim McElwain's calling card, that he's going to fix the offense. He's a passing guru. There you go. It didn't happen.
Yeah. And the quarterback problem at Florida, I mean, it's not like this is a one-year situation. The best quarterback they've had since Tim Tebow is beating Tennessee week 1, but he plays for West Virginia. So they've had an issue recruiting the right quarterback at Florida. They've signed some highly rated guys, but for whatever reason, they just haven't panned out. I mean, Felipe Franks just looked lost last year to me. Kyle Trask can throw the ball 100 yards, but I'm not sure what else he can do. And I do think Emory Jones, the kid out of Georgia that they got this year coming in as a freshman, I think he fits Dan Mullen's scheme really well. And I think he's got a lot of potential, but I'm not sure he's the type of guy you want playing year 1 as a true freshman. I'm not sure he's a Tua or a Fromm that can come in right away and complete 60-65% of his passes, not throw a bunch of turnovers, that kind of thing. It seems like he's more of a redshirt candidate than maybe some of the other elite freshmen that you've seen play over the last few years. So I tend to think Florida's going to struggle again this year at the quarterback position. I think their defense has fallen way off from its height of a couple of years ago. They still have a good defense, top half in the SEC for sure. But, I mean, let's be real. They won the East 2 years in a row, averaging 22 points a game. They're not doing that anymore. That defense isn't holding people to 14, 15 points a game anymore like they used to. Their offense is going to have to score 30 points a game if they want to win the East, and I just don't think they can do it this year.
All right, we got Uncle Lou on the line. Many of you know who exactly he is, but if you don't, go to Uncle Lou on YouTube and check out his take on college football, the SEC in particular, but he goes across the country as well. He loves Georgia. So do you have problems with your love and passion for Georgia? But I know that you try to keep it balanced and try to take a neutral take.
Yeah, basically what I do on YouTube is there's 2 different kinds of videos that I do. Like I'm doing a whole bunch of preseason preview videos right now, and I try to do those as straight down the middle as I can. I don't include a lot of bias or trash talk in those videos. Now, once the season starts, it's a little bit different. And those that have been watching me for a while, no, but I'm not an X's and O's guy or a stats guy or whatever. I'm a fan with a lot of opinions. And during the season, the videos are more biased than they are right now. So I have some that I try to keep as straight as I can, and then others are just, I mean, we could be playing the New England Patriots, and I would get on video and let New England know that we're about to beat them 100-0. I mean, that's just, to me, trash talk is just as much a part of college football as a band and a hot dog. I can't separate trash talk from college football. I don't know if that's a Southern thing. I don't know, but it's just a part of the game to me. It's not personal. I don't hate any other fan base or anything like that. It's all in fun. But it's pretty easy to tell when you watch my videos whether it's a trash talking video or me trying to be objective.
So you especially have fun with making up some nicknames across the SEC, the coaches, the teams, the whatever else. Any particular fan bases that you have fun with more than the other ones? Which ones may cause you to kind of pull out your hair once in a while, or just think this is hilarious?
I've attracted a pretty large following from the Tennessee fan base, and it was pretty intense in the beginning. But a lot of those guys have stuck around and they watch me all the time now, and they've sort of come to figure out, what it is I do. And, they can appreciate it, and they trash talk back with me in the comments section and stuff like that. And that kind of all started with the Hail Mary game from back in 2016. I was live streaming the end of that game. And, of course, I went absolutely nuts when Eason threw that touchdown pass with 20 seconds to go or whatever it was to give Georgia the lead. I went insane out here. I mean, yelling and screaming. And then 30 seconds later, I mean, I've never been so high and then so low in such a short period of time. I mean, even the national championship game, obviously that was a much bigger loss. But, that the time period of being up and down was more spread out there. That game was in overtime, and it was an edge of your seat type of thing. I mean, I went from thinking we were going to lose to thinking we were going to win to us losing in like a minute and a half. I mean, it was a roller coaster. And that video got picked up by a lot of people and shared around. It went viral, and so a lot of Tennessee fans floated to my channel after that video, and a lot of them have stuck around. And I've actually become, I don't know if friends is the right word because I've never met any of these people, obviously, but just talking with them in the comment section and on my live streams and things like that. But a lot of Tennessee fans have stuck around, so that's probably the fan base I interact with the most outside of UGA fans.
So we got Uncle Lou on the line. Catch him on YouTube. Just look up Uncle Lou, and it'll take you right there. Georgia, the SEC, college football. Tons of comments here. I don't see anything in particular, so I'm going to keep firing out some questions and stuff. Kirby Smart takes over, wins the bowl game, goes 8-5 the first year, then explodes. And you can argue that they had the best team in the nation. Regardless, they didn't quite get it done. But when you're right there toe-to-toe with Alabama with a 2nd and 18 to win the game, you're as good as anybody in the country. So are you pleasantly surprised Kirby Smart's really this good this early? Is he going to be able to maintain this?
I'm a little bit surprised. I have thought Georgia has had enough talent to compete for national titles several times before and not gotten there. I think that unless you're Alabama and Nick Saban, or maybe Urban Meyer and Ohio State, I don't think it really matters. You have to have some luck along the way in a season. I mean, there's been a lot of good teams that have never played for a national title. I think it takes a little bit of luck. I don't think surprised is the right word. I knew we had the talent. My question was, how quick can Kirby grasp the role of a head coach? Because that first season, you can make a case that Kirby Smart lost 2 of those 5 games. I mean, you can make a strong case for Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt game, well, I'm not going to get into it because I get mad, but we should have won both of those games. And when you watch those games, coaching decisions, it can easily be blamed for those losses. So I wasn't sure he would get his head around everything he needed as a head coach to get us there in year 2. I wasn't concerned about the talent or anything like that. It was the coaching issue. So maybe a little bit surprised, but really this has been about to happen, it seems like, for a long time for Georgia. So I'm not totally surprised.
So there is a luck or opportunity factor, whichever way you want to look at it. A couple of Alabama's titles, they basically seized opportunities. They needed help at some point after they lost a game, but I give them all the credit because when Nick Saban's got the opportunity to close the deal, it's basically taken a heroic effort from Deshaun Watson to knock him out just that one time. But the rest, if he gets to the gold medal game and he closes it out. And then the one season I go to, Lou, is 2015. When you talk about luck, Hunter Henry of Arkansas had to throw a ball over his head, if you remember this, against Ole Miss. And then there was a mad scramble in overtime. And then Alex Collins runs it on a 4th and 25 for a touchdown. Otherwise, Ole Miss is going to Atlanta and Bama's at home and probably doesn't reach the championship game or the college football playoffs. And Ohio State, the exact opposite happened to them. They only lost 1 game too, but they lost to Michigan State. And the only reason Michigan State made it was because Michigan botched a punt when they should have just downed the ball and the game would have been over. But the punter throws the ball up in the air and Michigan State catches and runs for a touchdown. Therefore, they go to the Big Ten title game and not Ohio State. So unless you go undefeated, you need some kind of luck somewhere.
Yeah. And that's exactly my point. And you'll hear a lot of Georgia fans say, Mark Richt should have won 3 national titles when he was at Georgia. Well, I disagree with that. I think Mark Richt had 3 teams that were good enough to win a national title. He should have got lucky in one of those 3 years, and he didn't. At 2002, we could have competed with anybody in America. 2007, in my opinion, we didn't even win the East that year. The second half of that season, Georgia would have beat anybody they played by 21 points. We took a boneheaded loss to South Carolina in week 2 that year. South Carolina was a 500 team that year. We went on a streak at the end of 2007 where we were just beating the hell out of people. It was unbelievable. And then, of course, 2012. All Mark Richt has to do is win it all in one of those 3 seasons. You know, it's not like he had a team that was good enough one time and the ball bounced the wrong way in some strange Arkansas game. I get that. But 3 times you got to capitalize on the 1 out of 3. Right now, Kirby Smart's 0 for 1. Georgia fans aren't complaining. He got us closer than we've been since 1982 to a national title. So Georgia fans aren't complaining. But, you know, at some point, he's got to win one. Now, he's not on the hot seat. Anybody that says that is crazy. And you'll hear that from Tennessee fans. Oh, you fired Mark Richt for not winning the national title. So if Kirby Smart loses 3 national title games in a row, you got to fire him. No. I promise you, if Kirby Smart loses 3 national title games in a row, he's not getting fired, because that means he made 3 national title games in a row. So, you know, every situation is different. But Kirby Smart is safe at Georgia right now for the next 4, 5, 6 years. Barring an 0-12 season, he's not going anywhere.
All right. We got Uncle Lou on the line talking up some college football. I got about 15 more minutes. Anytime you need to leave, obviously, just let me know. I got about 15 minutes and then lunch with my daughter, so that'll be nice. So, oh, I wanted to ask you, love college football. Obviously, we both love it, or we wouldn't do this every day. At the same time, this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at too much chalk out there, especially with the 3 best conferences, what I consider to be the 3 best. The SEC, it looks like Alabama, Georgia locked in. Clemson, Miami in the ACC, Ohio State, Wisconsin, although the Buckeyes are going to get some serious fight there in the Big Ten East. And we might get surprised, but do you see anybody out there that could jump up and be a dark horse?
Not in the ACC for sure. I think Clemson, to me, if Clemson doesn't win the ACC this year, that would be the biggest shock to me of any other team in any other conference. That would be more shocking than Alabama not winning the SEC, more shocking than Ohio State not winning the Big Ten, more shocking than Oklahoma, more shocking than Washington. To me, Clemson is so far above anyone else in their own conference, it would be an absolute disaster to me if they didn't win the ACC championship this year. I like what Miami's doing, but they still don't have the right answer at quarterback, in my opinion. Malik Rozier is never going to beat Clemson. You're not winning an ACC championship right now against Clemson's defense with Malik Rozier. I don't know if Mark Richt's going to have the guts to play somebody else, or if that person would even be good enough. But the gap is too wide right now, in my opinion. It would be a shock to me if Clemson didn't win the ACC. In the SEC, the closest thing to a dark horse I'm willing to even say without sounding like a complete fool would be Mississippi State. And I'm not picking Mississippi State to win the SEC. We're talking dark horses here. I like Nick Fitzgerald. The coach that they brought in is inexperienced as far as a head coach, but I like him. I think he's got some potential. And if they beat Alabama this year, I think things could get interesting in the SEC West. I don't even think Mississippi State is as good as Auburn, but I don't consider Auburn a dark horse either. I mean, they're a top 10 team most likely. So for the purposes of this conversation, I'm not even including Auburn. Big 12, what about West Virginia? Can they hold enough teams under 40 points to go 11-1? I don't think so. But if they did, that would be a dark horse team you could look at. They've got a Heisman candidate quarterback that always gives you a chance. You would think opportunity is ripe with Oklahoma lost Baker Mayfield. I know they have Kyler Murray and that other guy, and they're loaded at every other position. But I mean, they do lose Baker. Oklahoma State's going to take a step back without Mason Rudolph, I think. Even though I like Justice Hill, their running back, I don't think Oklahoma State really has a chance. Texas, can you consider Texas a dark horse? If you can, mark me down for Texas. I've been high on Texas for 2 years. They made me look like a complete fool last year. So I've given them one more chance this year. I think they can contend to win the Big 12 this year. So if you can consider Texas a dark horse, I would put them there. And no one in the Pac-12. I think Washington is the favorite in the Pac-12. I don't think there's anybody else out there good enough to make the college football playoff.
Yeah, so with Texas, I'm kind of in the same boat. The only thing I'm concerned about there is that they lost a ton on defense, and their defense was the best in the Big 12, I thought, last year. If you take Oklahoma State to overtime and only give up 13, and you're within 5 points of Oklahoma, they were real close last year despite losing 5 games. Texas had a nice season. We'll see if Tom Herman can get things fixed at quarterback and on the offensive side of the ball. Man, LSU.
Ooh.
If you look at that schedule, it's kind of like Michigan, but I think Michigan's more in line to be able to handle that schedule than LSU.
Yeah.
Like this is where scheduling, Lou, turns into be a big deal. Like if you take Iowa, I look at Iowa's schedule and they have an opportunity to, if they could pull off a win against Wisconsin head to head and they got that game at home, maybe they've got an opportunity. Maybe they've got a window. I don't think they're good enough, but they could do it. And LSU looks like, man, they could walk out of this thing 6-6. And if you put those two teams on the same field, a neutral field, who knows who wins? Probably LSU because they got better talent, more speed, but probably it's a toss-up. That's where the scheduling comes in. But, man, LSU, this could be rough.
Yeah. Is there a coach in America that gets more from less than Kirk Ferentz at Iowa? They're not recruiting 5 stars there. You know what I mean? That's got to be. I mean, I don't follow Iowa recruiting that well, but that's got to be a team full of 90% 3 stars and lower. I mean, I'm assuming they get a few 4 stars here and there, but Iowa wins a big game or two almost every single year. It seems like they're ranked a lot of the times.
Yep.
Anyway, but back to LSU. This could be Orgeron's last year, couldn't it? I mean, it's time to poop or get off the pot if you're Ed Orgeron. You know, they haven't beat Alabama since 2011. That's not all on Orgeron. But you can't run Les Miles off for whatever list of reasons you had and then keep Orgeron when he's doing the same, you know, he's not doing the same things Les Miles was not doing. You know, he's not doing any of that stuff either. I don't think he knows what he's doing. I think Orgeron's in way over his head as a head coach, especially in the SEC. Changing coordinators again. How many years in a row can you blame your coordinators? Eventually, you got to accept some responsibility. I don't think the guy's any good. I think if LSU doesn't win 8 or more games, 9 maybe even games this year, they could make a change. You could see Lane Kiffin at LSU. What would you think about that now?
So I've heard that recently, people bringing that up. So maybe Lane Kiffin's learned something. So I think from an offensive standpoint, in terms of setting up the offense, knowing how to work an offense and work over a defense and getting players in the right positions. He did some amazing things at Alabama. He took them from a ground and pound. We got McCarron at quarterback, and we're going to just pound you and then set up play action downfield to a very wide open, diverse offense when they needed to be. With Blake Sims at quarterback, they scored a ton of points. I think he's an offensive genius. Now, it seems like he's kind of learned something. So if he's done that, then yeah, maybe he's the right guy. Maybe he's finally matured and won't say something stupid or do something stupid that's going to send the thing off the rails. But maybe he's ready for the job.
Somebody is fixing to take a chance on Lane Kiffin. Some big time Power 5 school is Lane Kiffin is not going to waste away at FAU for very much longer. He's too elite of an offensive mind to be down there for much longer. Somebody is going to get him. If LSU is serious about trying to compete with Alabama in the West over the next few years while Nick Saban is still there, you've got to go out and get the absolute best available coach you can find. And I can't think of anybody in America who may be available besides other than Lane Kiffin. He an elite mind. Now, you're never going to get rid of all of his idiotic statements. He's going to have some of that. I do think he's learned his lesson and matured enough to the point where he deserves another shot at a big-time Power 5 school. And I don't see anywhere else in the SEC even potentially having a job opening this year. If there's going to be an opening in the SEC at the end of this year, it's LSU or nobody. I don't see anyone else in the SEC losing their job this year. So I could see that happening. And I just feel like it's going to be a rough year for LSU. I haven't done a preview video on them yet. It's coming up here pretty soon. So I don't know exactly where I would put them yet record-wise, but I can't imagine them being much better than 500 this year. I really just don't see it. I think Alabama's better. I think Auburn's better. I wouldn't be surprised if Jimbo Fisher beats them. Mississippi State may beat them. I obviously think Georgia's got a good chance of beating them. That's 5 losses right there. The Florida game, what's going to happen there? It seems like that's a close game every year, no matter what players or coaches they have. It could be you could be looking at a 6-6, 7-5 type year if you're LSU, and I just don't think they're willing to accept that there.
So we got a ton of questions on the chat, but I don't see anything that we haven't covered here. People asking us for playoff picks from last season, like if we would have gone to 8 teams. Well, we already explained that. We'd pretty much do the same thing. So just if you missed that, go back, watch the rest of the video. Yeah, I think it's a good call on Mississippi State. I read something the other day where the Penn State defensive players, like really good guys that have moved on to the NFL the last couple of years, they said when Joe Moorhead stepped on campus, our defense dominated the offense, and Moorhead basically pointed at us and said, this isn't going to take long. This is going to change. So have fun right now. And it changed. And they think the guy's an offensive genius. But obviously it's Saquon Barkley and some other pieces there to make that work. So we shall see there at Mississippi State.
One of the biggest games of the year, or not biggest games of the year, but one of the most interesting games of the year to me involves Mississippi State, and that's Florida at Mississippi State. I'm going to be honest here, and this isn't trash talk. Well, maybe a little, but I think Mississippi State is a better team than Florida. Am I wrong? Is the West harder than the East? Yes or no? Yes.
Yeah.
Mississippi State has had a better record last year, definitely, than Florida has. Has Florida been ranked #1 in America anytime in the last 5 or 6 years? No. Mississippi State has. Nick Fitzgerald is going to be the best player on that field, or at least the best quarterback on that field. I don't care which of Florida's quarterbacks they put out there. They're not going to be as good as Nick Fitzgerald. The game's in Mississippi State, too much cowbell, and that's going to be hilarious because all Florida fans have said is, because Dan Mullen has the worst record against ranked teams of any coach in AP poll history, right? Are you aware of that?
Oh, yeah.
The absolute worst. Yep. Now, of course, Florida fan tells you, well, that's because they have to play Alabama every year, and you can't recruit to Mississippi State. So, he was lucky to even get them to Mississippi State 8 or 9 wins. Well, if that's the case, then Dan Mullen should have absolutely no trouble at all taking a Florida team into Mississippi State and whipping them. Should have no trouble at all if that's the case. And why is Mississippi State ranked about 20 spots higher in recruiting right now than Florida is? And I know signing day is not until December and then another one in February, so cart before the horse type of thing. But if Dan Mullen, if can recruit all these elite athletes to Florida that he couldn't get at Mississippi State, then what's going on with the recruiting? So it's going to be hilarious to me if Dan Mullen takes the Florida team to Mississippi State and gets waxed. And I think there's a good chance of that happening. And that will be, to me, one of the funniest losses of the year.
Yeah, they're an interesting team. They took Bama to the wire last year. Unfortunately, they've got to go to Tuscaloosa this year, so I think that kind of takes that out of play. But they had them down to the ropes until Calvin Ridley made some game-breaking plays. But like you say, Nick Fitzgerald, one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the conference. Arius Williams ran for 1,100 yards. He's kind of a poor man's Saquon Barkley, so expect him to get out in some pass routes and do some things that Moorhead's going to let him do. They've had trouble at wide receiver. They bring in the #1 JUCO wide receiver who was an LSU commit way back when, Stephen Guidry. Montez Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, 2 of the better defensive ends in the country. They had a top 10 nationally ranked defense last year against a good schedule. So the only bump they had in the road they looked bad. Obviously, they lost other games, but was obviously going to Athens and getting their butts kicked was pretty much it.
Yeah, and at Auburn, too, they got manhandled. That was the week after the Georgia game, I believe. It was either a week or 2 after the Georgia game, and it was a repeat, really, of the Georgia game. They just got ran off the fields. I guess they get Auburn in Starkville this year, so maybe that'll be an interesting game because I'm pretty sure that game was at Auburn last year. So that's in Starkville this year, I guess. That'll be an interesting one, too. But, yeah, that's something to keep an eye on in the West. I just think that Florida-Mississippi State game, just because to hear Florida fans talk, Dan Mullen is the missing link. That's all they've needed. The only reason he didn't win it all at Mississippi State is because you can't get the athletes there, yada, yada, yada. So it's just going to be hilarious to me if he takes the Gators up to Starkville and gets absolutely murked. I can't wait.
So Lou, I'm going to throw you one question, and then I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day.
All
We
right.
got a bunch of people on the line, but DeCruz has one here for us, and I'll give this one to Lou. I'll pass this one. I'll just let you know that I cut a video with my top 10 non-conference games for this year, and then also my under the radar games. So one, like Lou pointed out, with Mississippi State, Florida, I had a bunch of those as well, but my top 10 non-conference games. So it doesn't have to be 10. But what non-conference games do you think are going to really kind of shape the season you're looking forward to?
I did my Washington Huskies preview this morning and uploaded it right before I came on with you. So I got to looking at that Washington-Auburn game. And I really think those are two top 10 teams, especially Washington. And when I do those previews, I make myself pick a winner, you know. And I went back and forth, even while I was filming the video, like you can see it on video. Like I'm like, oh my, like that's a hard game to pick. I ended up going with Washington, in that game. I don't know. I'm not gonna. A bunch of reasons that are mostly pointless, I guess. People can watch the video if they want to know why. But I ended up going with Washington. That's an interesting game to me, Washington and Auburn. Auburn's lost 2 games in a row. Both those games were in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And now they're playing a 3rd game in a row in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta against the top 10 Washington team. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a good one. Obviously, LSU Miami, right? That's going to be a great game to watch. Now, talent-wise, I think those 2 teams are pretty close. I mean, you could create 3 or 4 NFL teams just from LSU or Miami players that have graduated over the last 5 or 6 years, right? So players, I think, are the talent-wise, I think they're about the same. So I look at coaching with a lot of time to prepare, and say what you want about things I've said about Mark Richt. He's obviously head and shoulders above Ed Orgeron. I've got to give the edge to LSU. I mean, to Miami right now in that game. And this is hard for me to say. I'm an SEC homer. Those have been watching me for a long time. Yeah, I rag on Auburn and South Carolina and Alabama and all this. But when they play these non-conference teams, I'm 100% SEC. I'm that guy, you know, that everybody else from these other conferences says, look at this idiot, this SEC homer. Oh, Georgia can't win nothing, so he's all on Alabama. That's me. That's me. So it's hard for me to pick Miami to beat LSU or Washington to beat Auburn. But when I do these previews, I'm really trying to play it as down the middle as I can. And I just feel like Washington is better than Auburn. I feel like Miami is pretty close talent-wise with LSU, but the coaching advantage is huge to Miami. I give Miami and Washington the edge in both those games. I'm excited to see both of those in week 1. And, of course, I can't forget Michigan-Notre Dame. I mean, this game should be played every single year. I mean, I don't care if they have to do some sort of summer preseason thing and, you know, just cover the NCAA's eyes and don't let them look or whatever. Notre Dame and Michigan need to be playing football every single year. College football is just not the same without it. So those are 3 of the games off the top of my head that really jump out.
So, yeah, I got to say, Uncle Lou, that it's got to be in the back of your mind. And I don't necessarily consider this bias because it's founded. The SEC, so I used to argue with people because I would not argue that the SEC was definitely the best conference for about 7 or 8 years. There was no argument there. I did think that the national championship game kind of skewed the groupthink in the national media a little bit too much. Like if you looked and went down through the bowl games and the regular season non-conference matchups, you could make a case, not a case that anybody was as good, but that they were closer than what the narrative was. But now I think it's impossible for me to distinguish the ACC, the SEC, and especially the Big Ten. Those 3, but especially the SEC and the Big Ten. But it's got to be in the back of your mind, and it makes sense that when in doubt, go with the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, and you hear this all the time from people. Well, if you take Alabama out of the SEC, well, it doesn't work that way. No. Take Ohio State out of the Big Ten. How many national titles does the Big Ten have this century if you take Ohio State out? 0. Take Oklahoma out of the Big 12. How many they got? 1. Take Southern Cal out of the Pac-12. How many titles the Pac-12 got? 0. Take either Clemson or Florida State, either one out of the ACC. How many natties? Take Alabama out of the SEC. They still got how many? LSU, Florida, Auburn. You see what I'm getting at here. Sure. So this whole, well, it's just Alabama. It's just not. I mean, that's just not true. And I agree with you. SEC was so far above and beyond anything else for a 6 or 7 year period that it wasn't even funny. That is not the case now. The East is absolutely horrible. The Big Ten West, I think, is better. Is it the West?
The East. Yeah.
I think right now is better than the SEC West. I would put Alabama obviously up against anyone in the Big Ten East. But who's the second best team over there? Auburn. Auburn versus Michigan, who wins? Auburn versus Penn State, who wins? Could go either way. Who's the third best team in the West? That's where the Big Ten really catches the SEC. There is no third best team in the SEC West. Not really. Mississippi State. Mississippi State's not beating Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, or Michigan State. My opinion. So I would give the edge right now, if you want to look at divisions, to the SEC. The Big Ten East.
And that's one thing I love about the postseason games. A lot of people don't like all these bowl games, but I love the bowl games. And yeah, I don't necessarily love seeing 6-6 teams and 5-7 teams playing in bowl games, but still, if you don't like it, just don't watch it. But I love the bowl games because I love comparing the conferences. And then a lot of people talk about incentive, and you can't pin this on a particular conference because they must have not been the incentive. Well, I can't play into incentive. Those are really, other than a few little regular season matchups that are really weighty, we've got to look at the bowl games. Otherwise, we can't compare these conferences. And that's the only time that like-seeded teams play. You know what I'm talking about? That you can take the third seed from the ACC versus the SEC or whatever it is. They're almost always very closely seeded because that's the way they set up the bowl, where you rarely get the Oklahoma-Ohio State matchup where okay, it's the best in the Big Ten, the best in because they're scheduled way too far in advance, which drives me crazy as well. Yeah. I say you set up a committee that schedules everyone and you take it out of the team's hands and you schedule it and you have a big schedule release on May 1st or whenever, just like the NFL does. You say, there's your schedule, and everybody gets hyped up waiting to see who everybody's going to play. And I drag it out beyond that with a system, but that's what I would do.
And then sometimes, like last year, sometimes the bowl season proves what you thought you knew. Who did you think was the worst conference during the regular season last year? I thought it was the Pac-12.
Yes.
What were they, 1-9?
Yep.
In the bowl games. So sometimes it plays out, just the way you think it will. Real quick, and then I know you got to go. I do too. The new transfer rule and bowl games. Isn't that great? They let these kids play 4 games. That's great. But, now with these stars sitting out the bowl games that, quote unquote, don't matter, these lower tier bowl games, that's not going away. If anything, you're going to see more players sitting out those bowl games. So this is great that the NCAA has instituted this rule, not just so they can play in the bowl games, but any 4 games, right? Because you're playing like Georgia plays a couple of middle school teams this year. I mean, why not give these kids some experience without ruining an entire year of eligibility, right? And now when you got Leonard Fournette or Darius Geis or Josh Rosen or whoever else wants to sit out the bowl game, you've got a group of, 5 to 10 players, 15 players, freshmen or whatever, that you can get some valuable experience there. So I think that was one of the smartest, best, most common sense moves the NCAA has made in a long time. And let's be real, they don't make a lot of smart, common sense moves. So, kudos to the NCAA for finally getting one right.
Especially when it comes to discipline. You can say, they did this year, 5 years ago. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. It didn't really line up. All right, Uncle Lou on the line. Good conversation. I noticed that with some of this, that the buffering was a little bit, that's on me because I think Lou's feed comes through, the guest feed comes through me and then out to you. So a couple of people commented, but I was listening as well. And the audio is perfect, but it kind of buffered a little bit behind for whatever reason, usually crystal clear. So we apologize for that, but otherwise you guys could listen to it and watch it as well. Was glad I could finally track you down, Uncle Lou. And again, anybody who's watching us here has never seen his stuff before. You jump on there, and maybe like me, the first video, Lou, I was like, this guy's a knucklehead. What is this guy talking? This guy's insane. And then I get the method to the madness that there's a little bit of that. And he's pissed because Georgia just did something stupid or whatever. That's fine. And then that's passion. That's college football.
I spend a lot of my time having to explain to people that fan is short for fanatic.
I just kind of keep it suppressed a little bit, but man, I admire that because
that's a skill I've yet to master. But hey, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it. This was great, and I really enjoy what you're doing. And keep up the good work, man. I'll be watching for sure.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It was great tracking you down and having the conversation.
All right, happy Friday the 13th, sir.
Yes, thank you.